In the ever-changing world of politics, sometimes small moves can create a historic turning point. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney has just stunned Washington with an audacious strategy no one expected. Faced with Trump's golden visa policy, which not only puts pressure but also risks creating division between the two countries, Carney chose a different path, firmly stating that Canada would not accept a bad deal. This strategy has thrown Trump's calculations into disarray, leaving him not only stunned but facing an unavoidable economic revolution. Can Carney change the course of US-Canada relations? Will this strategy truly make Trump rethink his approach to neighboring powers? Let's dive into this dramatic story to find out the answers. If you agree with Canada's no bad deal strategy, don't hesitate to leave a 1 in the comments. If you disagree, feel free to leave a 0. Be sure to like, share, and support us with a sub so you don't miss out on more thrilling videos ahead. Now let's explore this story. During Donald Trump's presidency, one of the most controversial and far-reaching policies was the Golden Visa program. This policy required foreign investors to pay a fee of up to $1 million to obtain residency in the US, along with an annual visa fee of up to $100,000. However, when viewed from both an economic and diplomatic perspective, it is clear that this policy not only showcased a lack of understanding, but also created a golden opportunity for America's competitors, particularly Canada, to gain a significant advantage in the race to attract global financial resources and investments. From the outset, Trump's policy faced heavy criticism from numerous experts, especially regarding its practicality and long-term effectiveness. A policy of such magnitude, imposing compulsory fees, not only made foreign investors feel coerced, but also sparked a crisis of trust. While the policy's theoretical goal was to attract investment to the US economy, in reality, it merely widened the gap between the rich and the poor, without addressing other social issues facing the country. Most importantly, the requirement for such a high investment amount did not demonstrate clear benefits for the American people. On the contrary, it created an economic loophole that forced the nation to confront larger internal challenges. This was not a sign of confidence from the US, but rather an ill-considered move with potentially severe long-term consequences. Contrary to Trump's expectations, the policy did not yield benefits for the US, but instead unintentionally created a perfect opportunity for Canada. At a time when the US was indifferent to attracting international resources, Canada, with its savvy diplomatic strategy, quickly seized the moment to attract investors looking for a more stable and lower-risk investment environment. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney recognized this opportunity immediately. Canada's open-door policies, combined with political safety and social stability, made the country an ideal destination for investors, especially as the US struggled to maintain foreign investor confidence. Carney's strategy wasn't just a reaction to Trump's policy, but a strategic move that, in the long run, sparked an economic and diplomatic revolution that Canada had never experienced before. From these developments, we can draw an important lesson about building foreign policy and economic strategies. First, a nation must maintain confidence, but this confidence should be based on understanding and long-term vision. While Trump attempted to restore America's position as an economic powerhouse through the Golden Visa policy, he inadvertently created an opportunity for his competitors, with Canada emerging as the winner. Another lesson we can learn from this situation is the importance of maintaining strong diplomatic relationships and international cooperation. Trump's policy not only caused domestic divisions, but also weakened the US's standing on the global stage. In contrast, Canada capitalized on the difficulties faced by the US to enhance its position within the international community. Furthermore, crafting an economic policy is not just about attracting investment, but ensuring that these resources contribute to sustainable development in the country. Each policy must consider long-term factors, including social impact, the welfare of citizens, and the overall economic growth. When Trump's policy focused solely on short-term benefits and the interests of a specific group, it failed to achieve maximum effectiveness and created undesirable consequences. Donald Trump's Golden Visa policy may have contributed in part to attracting investment to the US economy, but it was not enough to foster the sustainable and stable development that the country needed. On the other hand, Canada's wise and flexible policy allowed the country not only to maintain stability, but also to seize valuable opportunities for further growth. Since Donald Trump assumed office, his tariff policies and unilateral decisions have sparked major public debates, not only within the U.S., but also in partner nations. One country significantly impacted by these policies was Canada. However, instead of responding negatively and directly confronting the U.S., Canada, under the leadership of Prime Minister Mark Carney, implemented a diplomatic and bold strategy, turning challenges into opportunities. Mark Carney, who previously served as the Governor of the Bank of Canada and is now the Prime Minister, is known for his cautious yet decisive leadership style. After Trump announced tariffs on imports from Canada, one of the most controversial issues, Carney did not hesitate to strongly criticize these decisions. Speaking at the Council on Foreign Relations, Carney emphasized that Trump's policies not only harmed the U.S. economy, but also negatively affected trade relations between the two neighboring nations. Carney pointed out that the high tariffs Trump imposed on Canadian goods violated trade commitments and created difficulties for many key Canadian industries, particularly the automotive and agricultural sectors. However, rather than offering one-sided criticism, Carney consistently stressed the importance of maintaining a long-term alliance and cooperation between the two countries, advocating for a diplomatic approach rather than adding fuel to the fire. Instead of retaliating with tariff wars and escalating trade conflicts, Canada, under Mark Carney's leadership, chose a more strategic and wise path, seeking new partnerships and strengthening existing diplomatic relationships. Carney understood that directly confronting the U.S. was not the best option, especially considering that the U.S. is Canada's largest trading partner. One of Carney's first moves was to expand partnerships with the European Union, EU. In 2017, Carney promoted the signing of the Canada-EU Free Trade Agreement, CETA, helping Canada strengthen its trade ties with European nations and reduce its dependence on the U.S. This was a wise decision, as trade relationships with Europe not only helped Canada maintain a strong economy, but also created opportunities to access large and promising markets. In addition to improving trade relations, Carney recognized that Canada also needed to bolster national security and enhance its diplomatic standing on the global stage. One of the key strategies he implemented was increasing Canada's defense spending. Carney's government committed to enhancing Canada's defense capabilities, especially given the increasingly complex global security situation. Notably, Canada increased its participation in international organizations like NATO and defense alliances with Western nations. Carney emphasized that Canada's security would be safeguarded not only through military spending, but also through maintaining strategic partnerships with allied countries, particularly in the face of rival powers such as China and Russia. Beyond increasing defense spending, Carney also focused on strengthening Canada's diplomatic relationships with other countries worldwide. By actively participating in international conferences, Carney helped Canada maintain a strong position on global issues, from climate change to security and trade. Canada's foreign policy under Carney's leadership has enabled the nation to not only maintain stability in its relationship with the U.S., but also expand its international relationships, creating new opportunities for the economy and long-term development. The relationship between Canada and the U.S., while always considered a close and strong partnership, has undergone significant changes under the leadership of Mark Carney. Disagreements over policies, particularly from the Trump administration, have increased tensions between the two neighboring countries. One of the most affected areas has been defense, where Canada, with its strategic vision, has taken several steps to increase its defense independence and strengthen its relationships with other international partners, particularly the European Union, EU. One of the most important adjustments in Canada's policy under Mark Carney's leadership was the commitment to increase defense spending. Previously, while Canada participated in many international military initiatives such as NATO, its defense spending as a percentage of GDP was still much lower compared to other allied countries. To address potential threats from major powers like Russia and China, Carney proposed an ambitious defense strategy, doubling Canada's defense spending by 2030. This goal not only aimed to strengthen Canada's defense capabilities, but also reflected the country's commitment to maintaining a key role in international alliances. With this plan, Canada would invest more in defense technology, improve cybersecurity defenses, and enhance military capacity to protect its territory and national interests. By increasing defense spending, Canada not only raised its self-sufficiency in defense, but also enhanced its position in international negotiations and relations. This was part of a long-term strategy to reduce reliance on major allies, particularly the US, for national security. Alongside boosting defense spending, Carney's Canada also sought new international partners to solidify its position in global issues. One of the strategic moves was signing security and economic agreements with the European Union, EU. Through the Canada-EU Free Trade Agreement, CTA, Canada not only expanded its market access, but also worked to tighten relations with European nations, including agreements on security and defense. With these agreements, Canada reduced its dependence on the US, creating a strong foundation to protect its national interests in an increasingly complex global landscape. Carney affirmed that signing these agreements was a crucial step in reducing reliance on the US and enhancing Canada's defense independence. While Canada did not abandon the important role of the US in security matters, it was clearly seeking to bolster its ability to self-protect and maintain other key alliances to ensure its national interests in the future. Under Carney's leadership, Canada has not merely reacted to Trump's policies, but proactively expressed its own stance on the country's international relations. Carney did not hesitate to criticize Trump's policies, particularly on trade and defense matters. He argued that Trump's policies, especially the imposition of tariffs and unilateral measures, not only harmed trade relations but also destabilized national security for partner nations like Canada. In several key statements, Carney pointed out that Trump's policies did not encourage international cooperation, but, on the contrary, created division and instability. Carney stressed that Canada needed to be more confident in maintaining an independent foreign policy and not allow any unilateral policies from the US to weaken its position on the global stage. He committed to advancing a strong foreign policy strategy based on cooperation with international partners like the EU while maintaining strong relations with the US. The change in the relationship between Canada and the US under Mark Carney's leadership reflects a significant shift in Canada's foreign strategy. Rather than continuing to depend on the US, Canada is implementing an independent strategy, not only in defense but also in trade and international security issues. By increasing defense spending, signing strategic agreements with the EU, and criticizing Trump's policies, Canada is paving a new path for its foreign policy while strengthening self-sufficiency and independence in a volatile world. Carney's bold strategy not only helps Canada reduce its dependence on the US, but also opens up new opportunities for the country on the international stage. This is a smart and strategic move, not only protecting national interests but also enhancing Canada's position in the global community. Under the leadership of Prime Minister Mark Carney, Canada has implemented a robust and sustainable economic development strategy, focusing not only on enhancing national defense, but also on heavy investment in key industries to create a strong domestic economy. Carney emphasized building domestic industries, particularly clean energy and mineral extraction, which not only strengthens production capacity, but also expands Canada's export markets worldwide. One of the key strategies Carney pursued was investing in defense and domestic defense industries. However, the investments were not limited to national security. They also contributed to the development of supporting industries, creating thousands of new jobs and promoting domestic technological initiatives. One of the main objectives of this strategy was not only to protect the country, but also to foster the growth of high-tech industries, especially in defense equipment manufacturing. Additionally, Carney placed a strong emphasis on investing in other strategic industries, including clean energy and mineral extraction. In the context of the world's strong shift towards renewable energy, clean energy is a field where Canada has significant potential. With abundant natural resources, especially wind and solar energy, Canada is becoming one of the leading countries in clean energy development. Renewable energy projects not only help Canada mitigate the impacts of climate change, but also provide stable and affordable energy for the economy. Mineral extraction is also a critical industry for Canada. The country boasts abundant mineral resources, from precious metals like gold and silver to essential minerals for manufacturing, such as copper, nickel, and lithium. Carney focused on developing the mineral extraction industry sustainably to ensure these resources can continue to serve the economy in the long term without harming the environment. A significant highlight of Carney's economic development strategy is the focus on internal cooperation. Rather than relying solely on diplomatic and trade relations with other countries, Carney prioritized building a stronger domestic economy by fostering cooperation between Canadian businesses and encouraging investment in strategic industries. Carney also pushed for strengthening connections between provinces within Canada, creating a tightly linked production system across regions, maximizing the use of resources and production capabilities in each area. This policy helped Canada maintain stability internally, while providing a favorable business environment for domestic companies to grow and expand globally. The results of Carney's investments in defense and economic development have not only strengthened Canada's domestic economy, but also expanded the country's global influence. One of the most notable outcomes is the increase in exports from Canada to other countries, particularly key partners such as the European Union, EU, Japan, and South Korea. The surge in exports has been evident in strategic products such as clean energy, minerals, and high-tech products. Countries like Japan and South Korea, with significant demand for renewable energy products and minerals, have become important trade partners for Canada. Additionally, trade agreements like the Canada-EU Free Trade Agreement, CETA, have expanded opportunities for Canada to export industrial products and agricultural goods to the European market. However, the rise in exports isn't only due to traditional products. Carney's policy to develop the defense and high-tech industries has also helped Canada export defense products and technology, enhancing the country's competitiveness in the global market. Canadian technology products are increasingly appearing in many countries, boosting Canada's position as a hub for advanced technology and defense equipment production. If you agree with Canada's economic development strategy, don't forget to leave a 1 in the comments. If you have a different opinion, comment 0. Remember to like, share the video so others can join the discussion. And don't forget to subscribe to stay tuned for more exciting videos ahead. Now let's continue watching the next developments. The administration of Donald Trump implemented a series of robust tariff policies aimed at protecting domestic industries and reducing the U.S. trade deficit. However, one of the sectors most heavily impacted by these policies was the automotive industry. Tariffs on steel, aluminum, automobiles, and auto parts created negative effects not only for domestic automakers, but also for the broader U.S. economy. One of the most controversial decisions in Trump's policy was the imposition of tariffs on imported steel and aluminum. These materials are essential to the automobile manufacturing process, and the increased tariffs on these items caused widespread instability in the U.S. automotive industry. Major automakers such as General Motors, GM, Ford, and Fiat Chrysler faced significant increases in production costs due to the rising prices of steel and aluminum, two key materials used in manufacturing car frames and other parts. Specifically, as automakers were unable to easily find alternative suppliers outside the U.S., they had no choice but to accept higher costs, which directly impacted their competitiveness in the market. U.S. car companies not only faced increased production costs, but also had to cope with changing consumer demand, as higher production costs led to higher car prices. In addition to tariffs on steel and aluminum, tariffs on auto parts imported from other countries, especially China, caused a shock to global supply chains. Critical parts such as engines, drivetrains, and electronics, many of which could not be produced domestically, were subject to high tariffs, increasing costs for automakers and forcing them to either reduce production or seek alternative import options. The direct consequence of Trump's tariff policies was a decline in automotive production in the U.S. With rising production costs, many car companies faced challenges in maintaining their output and profits. Some major automakers, like GM and Ford, acknowledged that they could no longer sustain production at these cost levels without raising car prices. To cope with this situation, companies had to raise the prices of their car models, leading to a drop in consumer demand. The increase in car prices in the U.S. caused many consumers to reconsider their purchasing decisions, Those in the middle and low-income brackets, which traditionally make up the majority of car buyers, found it increasingly difficult to afford the rising prices of vehicles. This reduction in consumer demand directly impacted the revenue of automakers, resulting in a significant decline in profits within the industry. Additionally, automakers faced fierce competition from international manufacturers who were not as heavily affected by Trump's tariffs and could offer cars at more competitive prices. This intensified the pressure on the U.S. automotive industry as they struggled to maintain their competitive edge in a volatile market. Trump's tariff policies had clear and significant negative effects on the U.S. automotive industry. The increased production costs due to tariffs on steel, aluminum, and auto parts reduced the competitiveness of domestic automakers and caused car prices to rise dramatically. The increase in production costs not only made it difficult for major automakers to maintain profitability, but also led to a decline in production and profits across the industry. However, it's also important to recognize that these challenges could create opportunities for the U.S. automotive industry if it can adjust its production and distribution strategies and seek alternative suppliers and partners. Despite this, Trump's tariff policies have provided a significant lesson for the U.S. automotive industry about its dependence on global supply chains and the need to maintain competitiveness in an increasingly globalized world. With American automakers needing to find innovative solutions to overcome these challenges, Trump's tariff policies have sparked a significant shift in the automotive industry, highlighting the need for flexible, creative business strategies that can adapt to the ever-changing global environment. Since Donald Trump implemented robust tariff policies on imported products, including steel, aluminum, and automobiles, the trade relationship between the U.S. and Canada has faced significant challenges. However, instead of responding with retaliatory tariffs or escalating the confrontation, Canada, under the leadership of Prime Minister Mark Carney, chose a flexible and clever strategy to protect its national economy. One of the key strategies Canada implemented was the Buy Canadian initiative, combined with strengthening cooperation with international partners such as the European Union, EU, and Japan. Rather than directly confronting Trump's tariffs with retaliatory measures, Canada adopted the Buy Canadian strategy to reduce its dependence on the U.S. in key production sectors. The primary goal of this strategy was to encourage Canadian citizens and businesses to prioritize using domestically produced goods and services. This not only aimed to boost the domestic economy, but also reduce the impact of U.S. tariff policies. Canada ramped up production in vital industries such as clean energy, high-tech, and manufacturing to replace imports from the U.S. This strategy not only created a strong domestic consumer wave, but also helped local businesses expand their market share in the domestic market. Canadian companies recognized that to maintain stability and growth, they needed to enhance production capacity, improve product quality, and serve domestic needs before expanding to international markets. One prime example of this strategy is the increased production in Canada's automobile industry. Major automakers in Canada, such as GM and Ford, invested heavily in domestic production lines to reduce dependence on U.S. suppliers. This not only helped reduce transportation costs and tariffs, but also created jobs and boosted the competitiveness of Canadian-made cars in the market. Alongside the Buy Canadian strategy, Carney and the Canadian government also realized that minimizing the damage from Trump's tariff strategy could not rely solely on domestic measures. Thus, they proactively strengthened partnerships with international partners, particularly the European Union, EU, and Japan, to expand trade opportunities and mitigate the negative effects of U.S. policies. Canada signed several important trade agreements with international partners, including the Canada-EU Free Trade Agreement, CETA. CETA helped Canada expand its export markets, not only for industrial products, but also for agricultural goods and consumer products. The EU is a crucial market for Canada, and joining CETA enabled Canada to leverage trade advantages with European nations, partially compensating for losses from the U.S. market. Japan also plays a critical role in Canada's diplomatic and economic strategy. Trade agreements with Japan have opened up export opportunities for clean energy products and minerals, as well as boosting direct investment into Canada's industries. Japan is one of the largest and fastest-growing economies, and enhancing trade relations with this country has allowed Canada to expand its export markets while reducing dependence on the U.S. market. Canada's flexible strategy has helped minimize the damage caused by Trump's tariff policies. Instead of responding with retaliatory tariffs, Canada opted for a wiser and more sustainable approach, ensuring the economy's stable growth and reducing trade tensions with the U.S. The Buy Canadian policy helped domestic businesses grow, create jobs, and promote economic growth, while international trade agreements helped Canada expand export opportunities and strengthen global economic ties. Donald Trump's trade policies, particularly his decision to impose strong tariffs on imported goods from countries like China, Canada, the European Union, and Mexico, have had widespread negative effects on the U.S. economy. While the initial goal of these policies was to protect domestic industries, reduce the trade deficit, and create jobs, the reality has shown a very different picture. Tariffs have driven up production costs, disrupted supply chains, and resulted in higher prices for goods. Industries such as automobiles, agriculture, and other manufacturing sectors have suffered significant losses, with many companies facing declining profits, and some even forced to cut production or lay off workers. Moreover, imposing tariffs on close allies like Canada and the EU has caused divisions and weakened long-standing trade relationships, which have been crucial for the U.S. economy's growth. Although these policies may have provided some short-term results, the long-term impact on the U.S. economy is undeniable. The U.S. economy is now grappling with declining production, the loss of key trade partners, and rising consumer costs, all of which could slow down the recovery and growth process. While the U.S. faces these negative consequences from Trump's trade policies, Canada has experienced a breakthrough thanks to its flexible and strategic economic development approach. Instead of directly confronting tariffs with retaliatory measures, Canada sought to reduce its dependence on the U.S. through the Buy Canadian strategy and expanded its international trade relationships. Agreements like CETA with the EU and trade deals with Japan have helped Canada expand export markets and strengthen its economy. Additionally, Canada has placed a strong focus on investing in strategic industries, particularly clean energy and mineral extraction, sectors with strong sustainable growth potential. This has not only boosted internal growth, but also opened new opportunities in building advanced industries, from technology to defense, laying a strong foundation for the future. Under Carney's leadership, the Canadian government has successfully strengthened relationships with international partners, allowing Canada to not only overcome the challenges posed by Trump's policies, but also take advantage of new opportunities for economic growth. These strategies have helped Canada expand its global influence while maintaining stability and strong development within its borders. With its domestic growth strategy and international cooperation, Canada is no longer overly dependent on the U.S. building an independent economy, combined with international trade agreements, has allowed Canada to reduce reliance on traditional markets and open up new opportunities. However, this shift brings not only opportunities but also challenges. Maintaining and strengthening international trade relationships will require flexibility and creativity in strategy, especially in the face of global economic volatility. Meanwhile, the U.S. is facing challenges in maintaining relationships with its major trade partners. Unilateral trade decisions have eroded trust among partners and could lead to missed cooperation opportunities in the future. However, Trump's policies have also created opportunities for countries like Canada, which are seeking to increase their influence and independence in the global economy. The future of both the U.S. and Canada depends on each country's ability to adjust its strategies. The U.S. needs to rethink its tariff policies and find ways to rebuild sustainable international trade relationships, rather than relying on unilateral decisions. On the other hand, Canada, through its flexible and creative strategy, is on track for strong development and could capitalize on new opportunities to build a more independent and sustainable economy. Both countries will face new challenges and opportunities in the future, and only wise and flexible strategies will help them maintain and strengthen their positions in an ever-changing global economic landscape. Thank you for watching the video. If you agree with the analysis, leave a 1 in the comments. If you have a different opinion, comment 0. Don't forget to like, share the video, and subscribe to stay updated with exciting future content. Thank you so much, and see you in the next video.